Welcome to Pivot and Profit, a podcast that brings you the change makers, the people who move things, the movers and shakers, for lack of a better word. But the people who influence Africa's growth, Africa's financial markets. We're talking banking, finance, equity, startups, tech, small and medium enterprises. Today's guest number 2, ladies and gentlemen, this is a man that wears lots of hats. Previously, I thought I wear lots of hats, but a jack of all trades, one that has been very successful at doing things and doing the hard things. But one thing that he has done for a very long time is hide. He has a very popular newsletter. If you're on LinkedIn, I will give you those details a little bit later on. We are honored to have Mr. Amon Munyaneza. Amon, thank you for making the time.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Amon, you've invested in a lot of things, but I don't want us to go into that investment. You've had quite a journey, right? But I want to start somewhere in your journey, which is, I want to believe 2008. And 2008, you were not living on this continent, but then you decided to come back home. You grew up across the border, but Rwanda is home. You grew up in Uganda, I want to believe, and then, you moved to the West because of the history of our country. Why did you decide to come back home?
Well, thank you. Good question. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. Great place. Really an honor to be speaking on your show. I've been listening to it on different podcasts, so really exciting to be here. My journey is like most Rwandans. I was born in Uganda, grew up there, having, my parents left Rwanda in 1959. I went to Uganda as well.
Your parents?
My parents.
As it was grandparents.
Why, yeah, no, that's how old I am. Now, I've been around for a while. So my parents went to Uganda, 59. I was born there several years later. Yep. And then, after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi and everything that happened, I came back to Rwanda in 1999, went to college in Butare, finished 4 years of college there, had to take a year of French, coming from Uganda.
Really?
I was, I was, there you go. I was speaking English, and then I had to take a year of French and study now 4 years in School of Business. I left right away, right after graduation in 2005, and went to the US. I lived there for many, many years. And then after that, I came back to Rwanda. And I know that a lot of people ask me, why did you come back? And for me, the question is, why not? Because that's taking a very big assumption that if you go to America, from Rwanda, you're not supposed to come back. Yeah? But I think that's a really, really false assumption. I came back to Rwanda because I weighed opportunities, and I saw more opportunities in Rwanda than I saw in the United States. And that's why I came back. I am now coming to 10 years.
Amon, you are a believer, and that's a person who you believe in faith.
Yes.
But you're a believer. You're a very optimistic human being. I don't know what to call you, kind, pessimistic, optimist. You're very realistic in things and how things should function. You wrote an article which was Africa is Rising, right? And this comes when you look at a backdrop whereby for a very long time we have had people talk about our time is now, our time is then, or the new Silicon Savannah and all that. Mm-hmm. But why do you believe in it now more than ever? Because in reading that piece, I felt a lot of conviction from you in why Africa is rising and why now the next stage is the economic frontier.
Absolutely. I think that a lot of people haven't really taken time to see how the world has evolved. You've got the West, you've got Europe, you've got America. Now you've got, the rising economies like China and India and Indonesia and a few others. When you look at the evolution of economies, you realize that everybody started somewhere. And then over time, they are where they are. So it's a process, right? And some people have talked about Africa being the last frontier. I don't know what that means, because there's a lot of frontiers, and Africa is not a country. But Africa right now is at a place where, well, first of all, what does it take for me as a businessman? I go after problems. I go where the problems
That's where
are.
the opportunity is, eh?
That's where the opportunities. I go where the opportunities are. When someone says opportunity, what they mean is problems. And when they say problems, what they mean is opportunity, because those two are interchangeable.
Yep.
So if you're looking at where opportunities are today in the world, you go where there are the most problems. I mean, there are problems in America and Europe and everywhere, but they're different kind of problems. So in terms of building industry, in terms of building technology, building telecommunication, agriculture, green environment, climate, this is where the opportunity is. And because of that, I believe that this is the place where money should actually be looking, where investment should be looking, because this is the place where you can start solving problems and basically grow old still solving.
That's a very fascinating mindset, right? It's a mindset that many would like to have, many want to have. Seeing the glass half full instead of half empty, right? Opportunity, the challenge narrative. But something got you there. There's something sparked that flame, right? Yes. Let's take steps back into what sparked that Amon flame to say, hey, I'm going back home. There are more opportunities back home, and looking at them as such.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my philosophy in life is about creating value. Everywhere I go, I look at where can I create the most value. And what is value? Value is the ability to solve people's problems. And I tell people that profit is a reward for doing good. So where can I go and do the most good and create the most value and, be rewarded for it? And people are willing to reward you if you create the most good. So what got me to the journey is I am a value seeker. So you can say I'm opportunity seeker, I'm problem seeker, but I'm a value seeker. And when what got me there was, okay, I'm standing, I used to work in Silicon Valley for a long time. 2007, we were building the first mobile money application back then. Nobody knew anything about mobile money. I came to Africa, to a few countries to share about mobile money, and everybody told me this thing will never work because people have their, cash money. But back then I saw that, I had a Visa, MasterCard in my wallet. I was using a credit card. And I knew that at some point, somebody has to be able to create value where we don't have to carry cash in our pockets, with all the problems that come with carrying cash. So what value could be created if somebody can take away cash and, make money digital? And I started pursuing, fintech back then in 2007, many years ago. So what really sparked me, back to your question, is I feel and I sense that I can make the most value, I can create the most value right here in Africa, in Rwanda, which is why I'm here.
I want to tap into something that correlates to your faith, right?
Sure.
There's that verse that says, to whom much is given, much is expected. Before, and I want to know how this adapts to your investment thesis, right? There is you do in 2007, you do this, you try to do this fintech. This year, you have a very good exit from a fintech. And many people say, don't talk about exits in fintechs or exits on this continent at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much of that belief has influenced your business acumen? Because your businesses are cut across. I know some in education, traditional education as the says, fintech, which, the financial technology, which it was the cool thing, I believe, until maybe last year or the year before that. Then you are also into health and health tech, but you're also investing in very traditional businesses. What inspires that thesis?
I think that, when you look at business, right? Some people look at it as a way of making money. I never look at business as a way to make money. I look at business as an avenue to solve problems in the community, right? And that, charities are supposed to do that. That's, some people think that's a charitable work, to solve problems in society. I believe that business is the best way actually to solve problems, because, hey, you get rewarded for solving a problem, and then you can solve it for more people. Now, going back to my faith, the same thing.
So you believe in some form of social capitalism?
Absolutely. I can absolutely say, black and white, I'm a capitalist, right?
Yep.
And I believe that profit is an amazing tool that we can use to actually expand the good in the world.
Yep.
Then going back to my faith, I believe that I'm here for a purpose. I'm here on earth to make a difference, make an impact. And I'll give you a few quick examples. Let's talk about a telecommunication company, right? Talk about, Safaricom, MTN, AT&T, right? Here we are in COVID. I'm a Christian, just so you know.
Yep.
And we can't have church, right? So we have to have online church, right? But online church requires internet, and it requires, communication. I had a church in Rwanda somewhere where the members of the church met on a group call. They called in a group call and a phone group call, right? So all these tools are coming from business, and now we are using it to have church. So I'm looking at that and I'm going, wait a second, telecommunication is now serving God, can we say, So imagine if COVID came and we didn't have, Zoom, and we didn't have, Google Meet and liquid internet, right? What would have happened?
That's a free shout out to Liquid. They should.
Well, yeah, they should be paying
for this airtime.
Absolutely, yeah. So when you cut back to business, you realize that business is, I don't want to say charitable, because that's charity, but business is social. Business is impact. Business is transformation. Business is spiritual. It's a God mandate for us to help God's people. And by doing that through business, we are able to generate profit, and profit is able to be reinvested so we can help more people. So it doesn't get any more charitable than that. It doesn't get any more churchy than that. It doesn't get any more spiritual than that.
Interesting. I want us to go back to some, an answer you gave previously, or a touch of that answer. Previously you worked in Silicon Valley, where the magic was happening globally, and I believe there's a shift that is coming.
Absolutely.
In 2013-14, Rwandan startups were, and I will say this with my chest out there, were on the same par with Kenyan and Nigerian startups. There was that group at Caleb, the first group with the Alex Nares, Esther Kundas, Aphrodis Foyo.
Are we naming names now?
You need to drop a name, Wati. Yeah, and they were doing some amazing stuff. Patrick Buchana, they've gone on many to produce and have impact across.
Sure.
But when you look at the pace at which the Kenyan startup scene moved, the Nigerian startup scene moved, right? Then we had the monikers of, the Silicon Savannah. Then we started, and by we, I mean Africa.
Sure.
We started to look at the Western model, or the Silicon Valley model, of building these new industries. You wrote a very convincing article, heavy-worded, that I agree to, but I want you to break it down further for our listeners and people watching. That the Silicon Valley model doesn't really work for us. We can't copy paste.
At least not yet.
None. Yeah. Far from it, right? And there's some countries that have gotten it right. Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, and they have nothing like the Silicon Valley model. What's your belief of why it can't work, and what do you think could work?
Well, yeah, and thanks for bringing that up. I mean, as I said, I worked in Silicon Valley for a while. I was around all these startups as they were starting. I was there, had a hamburger with the founder of YouTube at some point before Google acquired them. And, a few guys, Y Combinator guys and others, were always hanging out at Google campus. And then I was kind of watched the evolution of these startups in the Valley. When you look at what they were doing back then, when the whole startup world started, they were building platforms that were solving problems for business and later on problems for people, right? So B2B, business to business solutions, IBM iSeries platforms, I mean, if you call Microsoft a startup, I will not say no, right? So Office and all that. These were platforms that were empowering businesses to be bigger, better, and faster. And then you started having B2C, business to consumer platforms, right? Google Search, you had MySpace, back in the days, and then Facebook and others. So what you're seeing in the Valley is young people solving real life problems on the ground. And the venture capital industry really came out to say, okay, you are building something that is truly going to transform the lives of people, but you are not making revenue right now. So let us fund you until you get to revenue, right? So that's what was going on. So back to Africa. So that happens, it becomes an industry, the Silicon Valley industry. And then somebody says, oh, there are problems in Africa. Let us go and also create technology solutions. Not a bad idea, right? But when you come here, where Silicon Valley started, Africa, we're in 2020, it's actually now behind 40 years before, right? So what are you building now? You're not really building solutions to make African businesses run faster like we did in America. You are actually building African businesses. The businesses need to be built before we can even automate and digitize them, right? So
yeah, but we love this fancy word, leapfrogging, and
absolutely, it's great. So if you're going to leapfrog, how many leaps, right? So I think we are making 20 leaps and trying to create Silicon Valley, but we are just supposed to make 2 leaps, right? So when I got here, I invested in different stuff.
I use telecommunications as a tool, and I want us to use a telecommunication analogy, right?
Sure.
So I grew up in a home where there was a landline.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yep.
But that was, looking back, that was a luxury, a privilege.
Absolutely.
So many African homes to this day have never had a landline, but there was the move from not having a landline to having now a smartphone, right?
Yep.
To having a workable feature phone. So there was a leapfrog there. Is that the same context in which you mean by leapfrogging? 1-2 generations?
Yeah, I think that's the idea that people who brought VC business model to Africa thought they would achieve. They thought, hey, the telephone leapfrogged, we can leapfrog. I'll give you an example. Somebody comes and build a e-commerce delivery platform, right? Or we're going to leapfrog and go to online, right? Well, let's find out how many people actually have smartphones before we do that. So when you do the math, you realize, oh no, not everybody has, very, very few people have smartphones. Okay, let's look at delivery, right? Well, how far can I go with delivery? Which places have access to roads, right? So then you realize, wait a second, it's a brilliant idea, but now I don't need patient capital for 5 years. I need patient capital for 15 years. And that's one of the things I mentioned in my article. I say, hey, we need patient capital in Africa that is more patient than the patience that we're used to, right? It's not that we're not going to do startups. We just need to be a little more patient, right? And then also we have to take a step back from, digital startup world to digitalizing already existing brick and mortar businesses. That, I mean, my father-in-law worked in a manufacturing company back in the 80s. and he was running he was a head of technology. He was a CTO for an RV manufacturing company in the US, and he was working on the IBM mainframe computer back then. And in Africa back then, how many companies here where we are running on any form of computer, right? So we are coming from really far to now creating Silicon Valley. So in Africa, we need to take a few steps back, right? Patient capital is number one. Number two, we need to digitalize before we can actually create, technology platform. So take a few steps back, have more patience, build infrastructure, and that takes more time than I'm going to turn 10x. There are no 10x coming up. So now, without talking forever, so we get to hear a few unicorns happening in Africa, right? But for every one unicorn that we get to hear about, how many have actually failed? So, as a VC, you are playing a game of numbers, right? Well, the GP general partner is playing a game of numbers, but what about the limited partners, LPs, the people who put money? Are they also playing the game of numbers? And should we, as the Africans, play a game of numbers, or should we actually ask for capital that is going to help us build the foundations on which we can build our economy?
Yeah, but then where the LP is going to come from, right? Because when you talk about patient capital to people who don't understand that instead of a startup growing in 18 months or 3 to 4 years to get to a Series A, that it will need to take 5 to 7 years, right? To even get to that bridging ground just before Series A.
Yep.
So then, what becomes the source of capital?
I've been talking about I don't know if it is copyrighted or not, but I've been talking about PVC, private equity plus venture capital, right? Private equity is PE, invests in brick and mortar businesses, not really brick and mortar, but businesses that are already generating revenue. So PVC, in my mind, is we need to bundle businesses that are already generating revenue with the startups so that our startups can actually have a source of revenue. Now, you're talking about where are the VCs going to come from if the money is taking forever. That's where the game is now, is how do I play a game in African, ecosystem where if I'm starting a blockchain platform, right, I need to now first talk to the government to write laws for blockchain. If I'm starting a fintech, I need to now not start by writing code, but I need to start in the parliament to have the parliament pass a law on fintech, right? Yep. If I'm building a healthcare, platform, I have to. So we got regulation, we got laws. People are building digital platforms that don't have laws for them yet passed.
Yep.
And then you are on the market, and then you're going to be taken out because the laws haven't yet passed. So we have to. All I'm trying to say is we have to reinvent, we have to reorganize venture capital for Africa. We can't copy and paste. There is a model that works for Africa, but it has to be built. We can't copy and paste.
With you 110%. Amon, there's that one thing you look back. I like to call it the unmade decision. There's that one thing you look back and you're like, hey, if I had made that decision, my whole life would have been different. It could have been for better or for worse. What is that unmade decision?
I try to not live life with regrets, right? Of course, I've made bad decisions, a lot of bad decisions. I try not to regret them because, then I use my time for other things. But yeah, I can maybe talk about things I missed. One of those was mobile money, right? I was, among the first people to play around mobile money. I have a story how it all happened. I'm in Kampala with a friend of mine. We're having coffee. My brother calls me, and I call my brother and I run out of airtime. And then my friend says, hey, I can give you airtime. I'm like, well, how do you do that? He say, I'm going to send you airtime on your phone. I'm like, you've just made a money transfer. You gave me 1,000 shillings worth of airtime. If I go and I cash it out, this is actually a money transfer. So I told him, you just made a money transfer. So I went back to the valley and I talked to a few guys and we began building a platform, right? But, we didn't really know what we were doing. It was more like an idea. And, I dropped it. The day I dropped it, a few weeks later, is when M-Pesa in Kenya launched. And I was like, wait a second, somebody was thinking about this same thing at the same time. So, I wish I had the faith that my idea was actually serious idea, but we all get ideas and leave that alone. The other thing that I regret, and people shouldn't be regretting because there's still time, is Africa's real estate. Yeah.
Really?
Kigali real estate. I
No.
wish
Okay.
there was a time,
Real estate prices in this town don't make sense.
Well, I mean, there is a reason, the economy behaves the way it behaves for a reason. So, back in 2010, I was coming to Rwanda from the US. I had some money back then. I was working, so I had some money. And, people are selling pieces of land for nothing. And then you're like, well, why would I buy land in Kigali, right? I'm going to buy land in Boston, or buy a house in Boston. And then you're looking back, you see the appreciation between then and the real estate in Boston.
Yeah.
Which, I lived on the West Coast, talk about Oregon and California. This is insane. But the thing is, when you look at population growth in Africa and all the things that are going to be happening in the future, actually real estate is still cheap.
Really?
People
So you still advise me to put my money in real estate right now?
Well, the thing is, when you sit down and look at what we have to make available, the space we have to make available for people.
Yeah.
My dad used to say, hey, you've been to birthdays, people have had birthdays. Have you ever been to a land birthday? Land doesn't have birthday. That land doesn't give birth. People give birth. So the piece of land that was there 100 years ago is still the same piece of land, but people have birthdays. So if you have 3 children, now you have to divide your piece into 3 pieces. So, I mean, I'm not regretting, but I'm saying, well, if I got in earlier, that would be great. But there's still time because, we're still having more children. I'm not, but people are.
You've talked about, that thing that you regret, the unmade decision. What is the opposite of that? The one decision you made and you're like, you know what? That is a damn good decision.
Moving to Rwanda it was very, really tough. Yeah. I think that was hard. First of all, it was really hard because I was living on the west coast of the United States, beautiful weather. We had built a few businesses with friends of mine. We were running several companies and, making a good living, enjoying life, married, had kids. And then I got this bug about I'm moving back to Africa. And I was very scared, right? What am I going to eat? How am I going to live here? What am I going to do? All that. My wife is asking me the same question. And then we moved back in 2014. And, that has been the best decision because I have found the most value here, both in terms of opportunities, problems to tackle, people to mentor. It's really been very, very meaningful. I'm not saying there's no meaning in America where I lived. I'm just saying that personally I've found more meaning dealing with the opportunities that we have here than I did find meaning on the other side. Yeah.
Amon, I want to talk about your personal businesses, right? Some of them. I don't want to send revenue authorities your way.
Sure.
Balancing it out, right? I remember us having this conversation about 3-4 years with our producer here, Gustav. The young people love today love to talk about work-life balance, but the work-life balance is more of life than work to balance out, right? But then you need work to balance life out. So you have had the ability to build multiple businesses. At least I know for sure. I know how much you pay in tuition for your kids. So
You know, I say it on record.
it gives me an idea. Now, if that is happening, for you to be able to do that, you had to put yourself in a position to do that. Now, many of us don't have the luxury initially to come from well-to-do homes, right? You have to bring your seat to the table. you have to create for yourself a seat at the table. Nothing is handed to you. So you having that mentality, but then being able to stay hungry and then balance work and life out. How do you do that? And at what stage in life do you get to say, you know what, I'm going to grind for these next 10 years, and then at point XYZ, I can start thinking about a work-to-life balance?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we should give ourselves permission to question statements that we don't know where they came from, right? Oof. So work-life balance. Who said that? When did they say it? Why did they say it? Does it work for me? Is it true? So we really need to start questioning statements. I had someone say it takes 10,000 hours to become a professional at something. I said, who said that? My kid has, played a few hours of saxophone and she's good. The teacher goes, wow, this kid is incredible. Just with a few days. So some of these things that we hear and, we don't question, and Africa has a lot of those. There's a lot of things we've had from the West and other places. We need to start questioning them. So work-life balance, right? What is work and what is life? Why is work not life and why is life not work? So for me, again, I'm not, proselytizing or indoctrinating, but I'm saying that, I'm married. I got 2 kids, right? I am, I serve at my church. I have several businesses that I run, several startups. I have several brick and mortar businesses. So my life is about solving problems and creating opportunities for people, and meeting their needs, right? So my kids have needs, my family needs me, my business needs me. So for me, it's a flow. It's a flow of opportunity to serve. And I really don't make a demarcation between the two. Now, when I'm going to, Rubavu with my family for 5 days, and something breaks at work, they are going to call me and say, hey, this is broken. And I'm going to say, sorry, but I'm with family, right? And of course, you should have systems and processes where things don't break. But in the end, it is, I am one person. I am not Amon the businessman, Amon the dad, and Amon the husband, and Amon the, Christian. I am the same person. And all these things should be able to flow, together, because life and work are not 2 different human beings. So there is no work-life balance for me. There is just life.
Well, then to a young person, then they feel like, okay, man, I need some time to go out and have a drink. I need to go and hang with my friends. Yeah. Well, at the same time, I want to drive in a car. Sure. I want to live in an apartment that I can pay for myself, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what you're saying is there's no magic wand to this.
Well, I mean, where did you meet the people that have given you the best contracts? I know you're in media and you did a lot of work around, hey, I want a contract and all that. Yeah. Most of these people that gave you contracts, you met when you're having an evening drink. Okay. So were you having a drink or were you actually selling your business?
I was working. No. So I had someone who sent me a message. I didn't need. Sure. And she told me she doesn't know when I switch off. Yeah. Right. Because it like literally everything ties into everything. But I remember having a conversation with you about a week ago. Yep. Where you were trying to break it down for me, and you were telling me why everything should be everything, and I seem to have found my magic wand. Where X has to tie into Y to tie into Z, right? Yeah. And then goes back to the beginning of the alphabet to A. But that is also a very lonely journey. Mm-hmm. It requires being comfortable in oneself and being comfortable in saying, I know this, I don't know the other. I know this, I don't know the other. I need to put in X amount of work to understand even the average of something else, right? So how do you go about that? And especially in the very evolving, because you've lived across, I would say, 3 different generations that have seen changes that I would call crazy changes in such a small lifetime. So how have you been able to evolve like that?
Absolutely. I think, as we said off the record sometime back, everything is connected, right? Yep. And I think that very few of us realize that, that your home is connected to your neighbor's home, your neighbor knows your workmate knows your boss, and then in the end, it is one big ball, right? You go to church, and that's where you get your job. Life is connected, right? And the sooner we realize that, the easier it will be for us to enjoy life, because now we'll stop putting it in boxes. So when we put life in boxes,
I'm such a firm believer in compartmentalizing of the things.
Exactly. So again, another theory is, compartmentalize.
Yes.
But as it's going to become harder now with technology and with, the world has become a global village, compartmentalization is going to be harder. But going back to how do I evolve? How do people evolve? I think life has always been about what value we bring to the table, what impact we bring to the table. People are impacting us and we're impacting them, right? And that impact, the impact transaction happens in family, happens in business, happens in church, happens everywhere, happens when you're having an evening drink, right? So life is really about impact transaction, where I am being to the world and the world is being to me, right? And if we can allow ourselves to be, right, rather than do, right? Because I think we spend so much time doing instead of being. But really, the real value comes from who we are being. What I'm being to you, right? I'm here. We're doing this talk show. We don't want to talk about whether you paid me or not. But either way, I am being something to you, or being something to me, and maybe somebody's going to watch it. I don't know.
Yep.
And they're going to open their phone, and we are doing this because somebody could potentially watch it. So we are being to them. So now we become a circle of being. And we do it in justice when we turn it into jobs and work and doing. And I got to go out there and I got to get a Mercedes Benz. I got to build a big house. Why are you building a big house? Why are you getting a Mercedes? For what?
To be rolling around.
If you go out there in the world,
feel good,
and the value you are creating,
yeah,
gives you the ability to buy a Mercedes, by all means buy it. If the value you're creating allows you to build a bigger house, do it. If the value you're creating is not financially transactional, you're helping orphans, and you don't have enough money to buy a Mercedes Benz, it doesn't mean you're less valuable. It just means that your value is not monetary. Now you're riding a bicycle. My wife and I run several schools. There's a time we spend a lot of time raising money for charity, and we didn't have a lot of money. We drove a very old car. We lived in an apartment, but we were happy because we were creating value. So it's about who we are being to others, not how much money we are making. We kill it when we turn it into transactional, financial. How much?
It takes a lot of guts to do what you're doing, because it's not easy to do the hard things, but also to get it into that place. Unfortunately, this conversation is coming to an end. But Amon, before we end this conversation,
it will continue. Yeah.
Part one, ladies and gentlemen, part one of many. Before we end this conversation, what's your day-to-day like?
Well, okay. All right, you get personal, don't you?
No. What time do you get up? How does your day go?
I try to sleep 6 hours a night, okay? At least get 6 hours in. I don't always get 6, tell you.
No work-life balance, zero?
But, I've been a student, since I was 11. I went to first grade when I was 11. That's another story. I'm still in school. I'm doing my doctorate in business. So I've never had a day off from being a student. So there's a lot of school time. Everybody should be a student anyways.
Always.
If you're not in school, you should be reading something or watching this podcast. So my day is I wake up very early, right? So I do a little bit of prayer time and I read the Bible. I do that every day. And then I get on with my day. And again, something that a lot of people haven't learned to practice, I don't want to take credit for it, but it's waking up in the morning and sensing if you believe God, if you believe in the universe, what does the universe want me to deliver today? What does the universe want me to be and to who, right? If you have a job, you work in a bank, It's not about I am going to work. It's about, oh, I have to be at the office at 8, but what am I going to be at the office from 8 to 5?
Yep.
Right? So sometimes for me, because I'm self-employed, thank God, I can be a lot of things to a lot of people. But even when I had a job, that's what I did is, I wake up in the morning and say, what am I going to be between, 8 to 5, because that's work my kids at school. I have not missed dinner at home for the longest time I can remember. I am always home by 6, and I have dinner with my kids at 6:30 to 7. I can't remember a day in the last many, many months that I haven't been home for dinner. So that's kind of my day.
Well out. Structured discipline coming from the man that elevates potential and scales value. You can find him on LinkedIn. That's Mr. Amon Munyaneza. Writes a fabulous newsletter. It's called Value Driven. Subscribe to it. Value Driven is the name of the newsletter. You have been listening, watching Pivot and Profits. This podcast brought to you by the K Financial, produced by Pace Productions. You can find all our details just down below. Reach out, retweet, subscribe, everything. Amon, thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having me.